February 20th, 2025, a Spanish television studio. The host asks a then 20-year-old kid a simple, harmless question about the greatest motorcycle rider of his generation. The kid doesn't blink. He doesn't smile. He just stares dead into the lens and says one word. Who? Dead silence. The studio audience stops breathing. Pedro Acosta just looked at 9-time world champion Marc Marquez and erased his entire legacy on live television. Gone. Just like that. They told you it was a joke. They sold you the comfortable lie of a cheeky rookie having a harmless laugh on a late-night show. Total garbage. It was a targeted, calculated psychological assassination. And it worked beautifully. Because now, the worst-case scenario has come true. Ducati just locked these two men inside the exact same garage for the next 2 years. They told the press they built a dream team, a powerhouse. The truth? They built a cage match with no referee, and the blood is already dripping onto the floor. Everyone wants to talk about lap times and aerodynamics. Forget the bikes. This is about an institutional breakdown and a corporate betrayal that is ripping the paddock apart from the inside out. The official narrative is a carefully constructed fairy tale, and I am going to tear it to shreds. Let's strip away the corporate damage control right now. The official factory press releases desperately want you to believe this pairing is a beautiful passing of the torch. The wise veteran gently mentoring the raw prodigy. Lie. This is a hostile takeover. To put Pedro Acosta in factory red, the executives in Bologna had to violently sever ties with the man who actually delivered their modern dominance, Francesco Bagnaia, the reigning king. Tossed out into the cold, the factory threw their own champion down the stairs because they are terrified of what Acosta is becoming, but they didn't solve their KTM problem. They just moved a ticking time bomb directly into their own headquarters. Acosta isn't coming to Ducati in 2027 to learn from Marc Marquez. He is coming to bury him in front of his own engineers. And the evidence of exactly how he plans to execute this hit has been sitting in plain sight for 18 months. The media ignored it. The commentators laughed it off. But the telemetry doesn't lie. Look at the unedited tape from that appearance on La Revuelta. The PR spin doctors worked overnight, frantically typing up pathetic statements about Spanish humor and youthful exuberance. Don't buy a single word of it. When Acosta paused, locked eyes with David Broncano, and asked, "Who?" he was setting a baseline. He was telling the entire grid that the psychological intimidation factor Marquez has relied on for a decade is dead. Zero. Nothing. You do not disrespect a global icon like that by accident. You do it to establish total dominance before the engines even start. It was a deliberate breach of unwritten paddock etiquette, but the real structural collapse wasn't the insult itself. It was how the ecosystem reacted. Nobody sanctioned him. Nobody put a hand on his shoulder and told him to respect his elders. The entire sport just swallowed it. Why? Because they knew he held every ounce of leverage in the rider market before finalizing his factory deal. The kid realized nobody could touch him. So how did things get this violently bad this fast? Subscribe to this channel and you'll start noticing how many corporate lies like this happen right under your nose. Because the reality of this civil war gets much darker the minute they put on their helmets. 1 year later, February 28th, 2026. The Thai Grand Prix sprint race. The simmering tension that started in an air-conditioned television studio finally boils over into raw physical violence on the boiling asphalt. Marquez doesn't just pass Acosta. He aggressively hunts him down and makes catastrophic, violent contact. A desperate, brutal strike from a wounded veteran who suddenly feels the walls closing in around him. The stewards panic. They immediately hit Marquez with a pathetic one-position drop penalty, scrambling in their tower to keep the sport's golden goose from looking like a street thug. That meaningless penalty handed Pedro Acosta the sprint victory outright, his very first taste of gold on a Saturday. The factory PR machines instantly went into crisis mode, drafting fake apologies and preaching rider safety to the hungry media. They wanted everyone to calm down. They wanted a handshake for the cameras. But Acosta tore up the script. He took a live microphone, looked at the journalists, and detonated the accepted narrative. He refused to play the victim. He refused to let the stewards fight his battles. You know what Acosta actually said after getting rammed by a 300-pound missile? He defended the strike. He stood in front of the world's media and flatly stated that he would have done the exact same thing to win. Think about that for a second. Who walks away defending the man who just tried to put him in the gravel? A rider who is validating the violence. He was sending a direct message to Marquez that the rules of engagement are now feral. By publicly rejecting the steward's protection, Acosta violently stripped away the institutional safety net. He didn't want a sterile penalty awarded in a quiet room. He wanted the entire grid to know that if Marquez is willing to use his carbon fiber fairing as a weapon, Acosta is perfectly happy to bring a knife to a gunfight. This was not a young rider being diplomatic for the sponsors. This was an apex predator confirming the exact terms of the kill. And that level of mind games forced the 8-time champion to realize he wasn't dealing with a normal human being anymore. Which brings us to the Italian Grand Prix at Mugello. May a brutal, suffocating dogfight where Acosta and Marquez fiercely traded overtakes lap after agonizing lap. The team manager stood in the pit box and told the press it was a beautiful learning experience, a masterclass in racecraft. Lie. Acosta wasn't learning, he was auditing. He told the media later that afternoon that he spent the entire race tracking Marquez's tricks. Look at that word. He didn't say lines. He didn't say breaking points. He didn't say tire management. He used the word tricks. That is not the vocabulary of a student. That is the language of an interrogator breaking down a suspect's alibi. Acosta sat in the slipstream at over 220 miles an hour and downloaded the champion's entire survival mechanism. He was coldly cataloging the desperate little inputs Marquez uses when the front tire gives up and the bike violently wants to snap his collarbone. He watched the god of modern racing bleed, and he took meticulous notes. Who does that? Who stalks a living legend just to mentally catalog his exact physical weaknesses? A man who already knew what contract had been finalized in Bologna. And then the hammer finally fell. June 24th, 2026. Ducati course drops the nuclear option. They officially announced that Pedro Acosta has signed a massive 2-year deal for 2027 and 2028. The factory Ducati Lenovo team. Pure red leathers, unlimited factory support, and a direct, inescapable locker right next to Marc Marquez. The sheer corporate ruthlessness of this decision is clear. Ducati looked at Bagnaia, the man who dragged their brand out of a humiliating dark age, and shoved him right out the airlock. They willingly threw away years of internal garage stability because the raw fear of Acosta winning a championship on a KTM was stronger than their loyalty to their own rider. Bagnaia is now riding out the rest of 2026 with a huge target on his back, a dead man walking inside his own garage. The factory actively traded a loyal, proven soldier for a chaotic mercenary. They didn't sign a teammate to help Marquez develop the bike. They signed his executioner. And that violent betrayal sent a shockwave through the European paddock that guaranteed every single race for the rest of the calendar year would be a bloodbath. If this is hitting different, take a second to hit like. It genuinely helps the algorithm show this to more people who need to see it. Because the physical violence certainly didn't stop in Italy. The Hungarian Grand Prix proved that the competitive rivalry between these two riders was now undeniable. Carbon fiber shattering, paint violently trading at corner apexes. Two desperate riders trying to physically occupy the exact same piece of asphalt at 180 miles an hour. The television commentators called it hard racing. The factory PR teams called it a passionate fight for track position. Do not believe the soft version. You do not physically hit another man 3 times in 10 minutes by accident. That is a territorial dispute between two cornered animals who know they are about to be locked in the exact same cage. Marquez was desperately trying to establish physical dominance before the 2027 season begins. Acosta was brutally refusing to yield a single inch of tarmac. They are already treating each other like mortal enemies. Then came August, the killing blow. On August 18th, 2026, Acosta walked right up to a live microphone and publicly declared that Marquez is in the final stage of his career while I am just starting. Sit with that for a second. The sheer, unadulterated disrespect of saying that out loud to the press. But he wasn't done twisting the knife. 6 days later, on August 24th, he sat down with Autosport and laid out his entire sick philosophy for the world to see. He proudly stated that he has no friends in the paddock. None. And then he carefully defined what a true rival actually is. He told the reporter that a rival is someone capable of killing anyone, at least in a sporting sense. Killing. That is the exact word he chose. This from a rider who, as of late August, has raced over 50 times in the Premier class without a single full Sunday Grand Prix victory. 41 races, 0 Sunday wins. Yet he walks around the European paddock, acting like he already holds the deed to the property. He hasn't even won the main event yet, and he is already actively planning the funeral arrangements for the sport's biggest and most profitable icon. So what actually happens when the 2027 season begins in March? The entire power structure of global motorsport collapses. Ducati has deliberately engineered a catastrophic crisis they cannot possibly manage. You cannot put a predator who openly talks about sporting kills into a sensitive data-sharing program with a proud, violent 8-time champion who refuses to fade quietly into the dark. Especially not with the sweeping 850 cubic centimeter technical reset looming over the sport. The engineers will be forced to choose sides. The telemetry data will become weaponized. Every tiny suspension setup change will be treated as an act of vicious corporate espionage. Marquez is fighting a desperate war for his legacy, clawing for one final taste of supremacy before his body finally gives out. Acosta is fighting to steal the crown, and he has explicitly told us he is willing to destroy the current king to take it. The factory managers will stand in front of the cameras early next year, smiling brightly in their clean red polo shirts, talking endlessly about teamwork and mutual respect. It will be the biggest, most expensive lie ever told in the history of motorsport, because deep down, the executives know the terrifying truth. They didn't build a race team, they built a bomb. And they handed the detonator to a kid who loves the sound of explosions. There is no going back from this. The psychological warfare is already written into the contracts in permanent ink. The fairings are already cracked. And the exact moment those garage doors open for the 2027 test, someone is going to lose their career. This isn't racing anymore. It is a slow, methodical corporate execution playing out live on television. If any of this stuck with you, like and subscribe. There's so much more to uncover.